Welcome, and thanks for making time in your day, in your week, to participate in conscious conversations. With conscious conversations, we seek to share, discuss, wrestle with the big ideas of the day, the issues, the topics. Sometimes those issues are historical and we bring them into contemporary context. But every conversation that we have has the same goal. And the goal is to identify the actions that we can take now, today, that allow us both as individuals and as a collective to grow and become all that God created us to be, and to live in ways that work towards the well-being of both our people and this planet. You are encouraged to submit questions and comments during the conversation because we want you to be an active part of the conversation. In today's conversation, you really need to be paying attention. The topic is the seriousness of this current American situation. And I really probably should have said this current global situation. And we have as our guest a very special guest, Reverend Bishop D. Kimathi Nelson. He is the presiding bishop of the Shrines of the Black Madonna, a national and international church movement that has been at the forefront of the Black liberation struggle since it was founded in 1953 in Detroit, Michigan. He is the presiding bishop, mentored by its founder, the Honorable Reverend Jeramogi Abebe Ajiman, his born name, Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., who was not only the founder of the Shrine, but is considered the father of Black liberation theology. And his mentee, Bishop Nelson, is now one of the nation's most revered Black liberation theologians. He's also a graduate of Yale Divinity School. Yale Divinity School, as most of you know, is considered the Candler School of Theology of the North. Bishop Nelson is the former pastor of the Black Church at Yale, a proponent of best self theology, and also, little known fact, he played basketball at the University of Detroit for the Titans. He was a point guard. I think the years he played was 1915 through 1918, but we'll ask him about that when he comes on. But all jokes aside, when I look at the Trump presidency, or the past Trump presidency, the lawlessness and cruelty of that administration, the authoritarian / fascist leanings of Trump's actions and policies, and not just Trump's, but all the king's men. When I look at the police killings of unarmed Blacks that continue nonstop, even after a global awakening, or seeming global awakening, after the murder of George Floyd, when I see insurrectionists who they did storm the Capitol, beat police officers, killing a few, seeking to overturn a democratic election, and seeking also to kill elected officials. When I see those folks get a pass, it seems, for their insidious actions, I'm wondering why more folk aren't alarmed at the direction that this nation and world is headed. And so I wanted to have someone who could address whether or not I'm crazy for thinking that we need to be on alert, or if, something else. But hence our guest. And without further ado, we want to bring him on. As I said, Bishop Kimathi Nelson. Welcome, good brother. How you doing, sir?
I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you for those lugs.
1915 through 1918, right?
When my father was born.
Go ahead.
I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And I want to jump right on into it. The first question being, is it me? Am I crazy, or should we be way more concerned about what's happening in this country and the globe?
Well, you're right about the fact that is something to be alarmed about, and you're also right about the fact that it's global. I mean, America is supposed to be the model liberal democracy in the world, and so it kind of sets the pace for Germany and France and England and Canada, and even the countries that have autocratic governments. They at least go through the pretense of acting like they have some kind of election, because they know that their legitimacy is dependent upon people appearing to vote for them and choose them as their elected leader. Mm-hmm. So when you throw out the notion that people have to be elected, we're getting into some very dangerous territory. What we are experiencing is a struggle for power that's rooted in a system of racial hierarchy. Because of the demographic changes, the demographic tsunami that is sweeping across America, where there's going to be a majority of people of color in the country as early as 2045 is what's projected. This has thrown white people into a tizzy. They've kind of lost their minds, as if as soon as we have the majority, the whole world is going to change. I really don't think that's true, but that's the way they're looking at it. And they're deathly afraid that when the tables are turned, that people of color are going to treat them the way that they have treated them. Mm-hmm. And so they become tribal in this environment. They become tribal and fighting for survival. But they're not just fighting for survival. They're also fighting to maintain dominance and superiority. So they want to have the upper hand. And when you got one person, one vote system of government, then you really can't control things as a minority. Unless you're going to have policies that are generally acceptable to the vast majority of people in the country, then you can't have your way. And so they can't have both white supremacy and be a minority at the same time. Mm-hmm. Within a democratic system. They would have to change the form of governance in order to be able to control things as.
Time out. So you're saying that these good red, white, and blue flag waving American patriots would sacrifice their democracy to maintain white supremacy?
Yeah. I mean, whiteness and white supremacy predates democracy in America, and it also it supersedes Christianity as a value. The primary value for white people in America is white supremacy. It's kind of like a social property. It's a property. It's like, if I don't have it, something has been taken from me, because it's a social property. It projects me or promotes me into the master class. And therefore I have benefits and privileges and advantages that people who are not white don't have. It's like, the African worldview says, I am because we are. But the white worldview is more like, I am because you are not. I am who I am. I have the advantages, the privileges that I have because you don't deserve them. And so therefore society is organized around who deserves health care, who deserves education, who deserves a decent job, who deserves loans from the bank and protection from the government, who deserves it. And it's always been defined by white supremacy is at the front of that line. So yeah, you kind of talking about giving that up or losing that. It's like a zero-sum game where you say, I don't want to lose that, and I'm willing to really do anything necessary to preserve it. So if we have to get rid of democracy in order for me to preserve the dominant position that I enjoy in society, then I'm all for that. Now the problem is that it's not just an American thing. It'll affect the rest of the world too. And that's why these things going on with the Trump administration was so earth-shattering, because it basically was destroying the legitimacy of all of the Western governments. They're all built on democracy. And if America, the leading democratic society, is willing to put democracy behind it, then all these white nationalist movements in England and France and Germany and all across Europe, all these white nationalist movements who have been like on the periphery, who are complaining about people of color becoming predominant in their societies, then they can also have, if the United States gives up on democracy in favor of a racial autocracy, then other governments across the world will do it too. And that will change the geopolitical situation of the whole world. That
sounds a whole lot like a quote I literally just heard yesterday. Pastor James Dixon was quoting the late State Rep Al Edwards, who told him that we are just a couple of laws between us and re-enslavement. And it sounds like, and I think I remember hearing you say in past sermons that that whites are basically insecure. It's
right.
This insecure, and insecure white people are dangerous. Can you speak to that? Because it sounds like that's what we're dealing with.
Well, I mean, what you have to understand is you got a whole civilization built on a lie. That lie is that people of color are not people, or not as human as they are. So this fundamental lie is at the heart, as James Baldwin put it, it's at the heart of all our present trouble, that they keep trying to defend the lie. Now, if you're defending a lie, there's all kind of evidence that this is a lie. So you got to come up with more and more elaborate rationalizations and explanations to justify this lie. You have to justify it in philosophy. You have to justify it in law. You have to justify it in every sphere of life. You have to create a master narrative that justifies this lie. But it's a lie, and so its slip is going to be showing sometime. It's going to have a telltale slippage, and you're going to be able to see that it's a lie. And so this lie that they're trying to preserve and protect, it really can't be preserved and protect, because truth is going to show that it's fundamentally a lie. So that's where we are. That you can't build a civilization on a lie and then expect that everything is going to go smoothly, because there are going to be a lot of inconvenient truths that pop up and poke holes in your lie. So the American democracy is built on this lie, because there's never really been democracy in America. There was a democracy first of landowning white men. And then eventually it included more and more people. And then eventually it was extended to black men. And then it was extended to women. But we have been growing toward a true democracy, one person, one vote, which could work if somebody was going to adhere to it. But if your agenda is white supremacy, then there was no democracy in the South, in the Southern United States, and there was no democracy in Alabama in 1960. Black people couldn't go to the polls. It wasn't a democracy. It was a few people who were able to vote, and the voting turnout was in the single digits in those states. So very, very few people made the determination on how resources were allocated and who's going to represent them. And then they tended to vote for the same people over and over and over, so that when they went to Congress, they had seniority, and they became the heads of the various committees and had real power. So there's this whole idea that America is a democracy is a myth. And now that white population is getting ready to slip into the minority, they're willing to blow the whole thing up and get another form of government. As a matter of fact, there's a significant number of the white population that was polled, that I think it's like 25%, that said that they're not wedded to democracy as a form of government.
They're not even trying to keep the facade up anymore.
No, they said if we can have something else.
Yeah, more like a South African apartheid style form of rule, right?
Yeah, like all over Africa, you have these countries that were intentionally carved with minorities and majorities in terms of their tribal makeup, so that they could use the minority to control the majority. And that's why Africa is always immersed in turmoil and embroiled in all kind of intrigue, because you have these political lines that really don't mirror the natural lines of population. They were intentionally set up so that you would have antagonistic tribal shenanigans going on all the time.
So what I'm hearing from you is there's a global white supremacist movement that continues to grow out of its insecurity with the changing what was the term? Demographics of the various countries, fear of a black planet, whatever you want to call it. And this insecurity leads to a willingness to throw out democracy, rule of law, anything to maintain it. That sounds dangerous. That sounds crazy dangerous. So my question then is, why are we, Black folk, not recognizing the obvious and very real escalating dangers that are all around us right now? Why don't we see this?
Well, Black people have always used Christian and democratic arguments to argue against racism and exploitation. And that's our arsenal. We use Christian arguments, we use democratic arguments to say that the way we are treated is wrong. And the truth be told is this is really about power. It's not about Christianity, and it's not about democracy. It's about power. And we are kind of naive about power. We don't seem to understand. I mean, our most potent political tool is protest, which is really crying loud to power to treat you differently. Like, it's like a baby crying. It's like the baby's crying is letting you know, I don't like what's going on. But it's not power. It's not a power response. And so we don't understand that white people are committed to having power. And they're willing to topple the foundations of civilization to maintain the power relationships that exist. We are not willing to topple the foundations of civilization to change it. So yeah, we're kind of like, for us, not having a democratic system is unthinkable. We don't have any alternative moves. Like if in the morning there's a coup and an autocratic government is put in place, we don't have any strategy for that problem. We don't have any moves for, we don't have any power moves that are going to deal responsibly with that crisis. But that is really where we are. And if the insurrection in DC had gone just a little further, that's where we would be right now, where there would be a government in Washington that had taken power against the will of the majority of the public. But they had control of all the organs of the government and all the institutions and resources of the government, even though they were not legitimately elected. And they would be able to create policies, pass laws, use their force in any way possible to get the general public to comply. And we don't have any program for dealing with that. As a matter of fact, for us, it's unthinkable.
And it's interesting that you would say it's unthinkable because it's already happened before. It happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, with a democratically elected governance body, black and white, was literally overthrown. The same kind of violence.
Right. Well, I mean, and you gotta like that's all really the Civil War was, is we reject your authority, we're going to succeed and establish another authority. And so, I mean, it happens all over the world every day. And most recently, it happened in Myanmar, where the military just took over the government. Like, get out of the way, stop. We don't like what's going on. We're taking over, and took over.
And at some white nationalist convention recently, someone from the crowd said, "We need Miramar here." And I think it was Mike Flynn, the convicted felon, who was one of Trump's men. He said, "Yeah, we do need that. Yeah, they're wide open to this."
Yeah, he said it could easily happen here, and it has to do with the white population that's involved in this white supremacist struggle. They're way more coordinated and organized than people of color. Like, we think all people of color are in one club, and we're not. I mean, that's why the whole 2045 white people becoming a minority thing is it's a boondoggle. It's not really the end of the world, because the people of color in America are not all on the same page. So it's not like you got this united front that's not a majority, and we're going to have to submit to the wishes of this group. We're not organized like that. And it's like, if white people want to know what black people are going to do when they have control of the government and are the majority, just look at South Africa. I mean, nothing changed. They kept their wealth. They are able to function in society. They're not under any kind of threat. I mean, that's just, first of all, if we got total power, that's not the way we roll. So you can't tell them that, though. Their fear and insecurity is driving the bus, and they're acting out of that, and they reinforce it in their own echo chambers, in their own places where they're talking to each other. They're magnifying this problem into something that is an existential crisis that is driving them absolutely crazy, and they're willing to do anything to not just to protect themselves, but to preserve their dominant position in society.
Is that what's driving the bus in DC in terms of the gridlock? Because it seems like the GOP is standing up strong for white supremacy and authoritarian laws, but it doesn't seem like the Democrats are fighting back as if literally everything is at stake.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way that in a community in the South, they demanded total loyalty of the white population. And they would treat what they call, I give it a nice name, a race traitor. They would treat a race traitor worse than they would treat black people. Because of the fact that they've depended upon solidarity. The Klan whipped a lot of white people because they broke solidarity, and solidarity was the key to their power. So it's kind of like a more modern expression of the same thing. In Congress, they've gone tribal. The Republican Party is tribal, and they're looking out for their tribal interests, and they vent their wrath on people who break ranks with the tribal orthodoxy, and so that's really what you're looking at. They're all on the same page, and if you get off the page, they're going to vent their wrath against you.
And if you get off just a piece of the page, because
Right.
Liz Cheney was on the white supremacist train. She just disagreed with a couple of things.
Right.
And they ready to kick her out. But
right, she's one of the most conservative people in the Congress.
Right.
But she disagreed on the Trump thing, and that was it for her.
That was it. Reverend Ronald Galvin said, "Did I hear that right? White supremacists are willing to topple the current order of our civilization to replace it with something else to maintain their power, but we are not willing to do the same." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's they understand power. We try to argue and fight within the rules. We try to function within the rules that we understand, establish guidelines and parameters for our engagement. And so we take the democratic propaganda and the Christian propaganda. And that was Martin Luther King's whole thing. He argued for democracy, and he argued for Christian values. And they shot him in the face. It's when it comes to power, the problem was they couldn't argue with him. They could not have a rational argument with him. Mm-hmm. He was going to undress them in an argument. And so the only thing that you could do to preserve power was to silence him. Mm-hmm. And to silence everybody that was trying to raise the same questions. And we keep playing this morality thing, this morality game. We're talking about what's not fair, what's mm-hmm. not just. Well, the whole damn thing is not fair and just. It's about power. And until we're willing to have a contention on the basis of power, we are never going to be able to deal with these kind of people. Now, when I say contend on the basis of power, I'm not necessarily advocating violence. I'm not excluding it either. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is there has to be consequences for people that violate you. There has to be consequences for people that don't acknowledge your rights or stand up for your freedoms. There has to be consequences to people that would oppress and exploit you. There has to be consequences. It can't be, it happened, it was sad, it was tragic, we make a movie about it and go on until it happens again. There has to be definite consequences, and we have to be organized enough to inflict consequences. And again, I'm not just simply talking about violence. I'm talking about the ability to withhold our money, the ability to not support certain things, the ability to just simply point out, hey, we're not going into Walmart until 2025. Mm-hmm. We're not buying Church's chicken, or we're not buying a Popeye's chicken all this year. To make a point, we're not dealing with certain banks at all. We were drawing all of our money to prove a point. We have to have creative mechanisms. As large a minority as we are, the fortunes of the country are kind of tied up in how we behave. So we have to learn how to inflict pain on those people that support pain inflicted on us.
Yeah. I agree with that 1,000%. In fact, Reverend Darla Broden, good sister, was really asking the same question you were. I wonder when we will decide the power dynamic present in America is antithetical to our well-being and work towards freedom instead of trying to make people who lie all the time live up to their promise.
Yes, it's like being somebody's crazy ex-lover, that you're trying to get somebody to take you back and treat you well when they've proven that they're committed to a certain kind of dealing. We have to have alternative strategies that have to do with us and what we can control. And until we're willing to do that, I mean, I don't want to say it the way that I'm thinking it. And so we need to be able to put white people on hold. We need to be able to put Christianity on hold and said, until you're willing to deal with us differently than you have in the past, we don't want anything to do with you.
Woo. All right. Now you're saying a whole lot. And when you said that, I was thinking of Toni Morrison. I don't remember what book it was, but when Black folk got killed in that book, they had a mechanism for delegating the pain. I don't know if that's the exact phrase that Reverend Martin Luther King used back in the day, but he was of the same mindset. He said, delegate or distribute the pain, something like that. They've got to feel it.
Yeah,
they've got to feel it.
If you want to protest, I mean, don't go down there hollering no justice, no peace. Go lay down on the airport until the planes can't land. Go disrupt traffic. People are not going to change their behavior until you make their lives uncomfortable. As long as you're the only one with your life uncomfortable. All Black people scared for their children to go out on the street. All Black people got to have the story, got to have the talk with their children and be in mortal fear every time their teenage child goes out the door. Well, there's something we can do about that. I mean, there are things we can do where it's not just us walking out the door in fear.
Yeah.
All these people that shoot Black people, they walk in the street. They have paid no consequences whatsoever. They're holding press conferences and giving out signatures. They're benefiting from their crime.
Like George Zimmerman.
Yeah. Benefiting from their crime. And he's not hiding. There has to be consequences for messing with Black people. As long as you can mess with Black people with impunity, we're gonna be messed with. There gotta be some pushback.
So with that being said, what's the threat level that Black people should be operating under on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the highest threat level possible? Where should we be?
I would say 7. We should be very much concerned that.
That's pretty darn high.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I don't think we understand that there's a global white nationalist movement, and that Steve Bannon and Donald Trump and I forget the name of the Russian gentleman who is Vladimir Putin's Rasputin, who is his tutor. They have a view of the world where the white Christian countries of the world should join together in order to preserve white Christian domination of the world. And that's why Steve Bannon has been running back and forth to Europe. And that's why Alexander Dugin, that's the guy's name that's in Russian. They have a view of the world where they feel under threat because biologically, when whiteness comes into contact with color, whiteness loses the biological dynamic. And so in order to preserve that, they have a vision of the world of a white Christian domination that is so powerful that they can control the world from their position of minority. That's their vision. And that's the vision of a lot of these groups in America who are white supremacists in their own right. So it's a bigger problem than we seem to understand. And I don't mean to create alarm, but when you put the advancement of technology and artificial intelligence that is going to proliferate in the years to come, the powers that be are going to need a lot fewer people. They'll be able to do everything they need to do with a lot fewer people. And so they see this handwriting on the wall, and they're trying to get in a dominant position as quickly as they can and to hoard all their resources so that they can use them in this struggle to basically have the vast majority of the world in a feudal existence that's living on the naked edge of poverty while they have complete and total dominance.
Okay, so with that being said, as a people, what should our response be? Are there 2 to 3 things that we need to be doing as individuals and as a collective?
First thing we'd have to do is organize. We don't really have any organization. We have a lot of people that make a lot of noise, but we don't have organization. We don't have people committed to a program and a vision of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build that can, in an organized and disciplined way, put pressure on the society. Most people are stuck in the middle. The vast majority of people are in the middle. But if you're not organized, the people who are organized tend to be able to create a case where they draw most of that undecided people into their camp. We have to be organized enough so that we create an alternative for how we might be able to coexist together. That if we can create self-determining communities that really don't depend on extracting wealth other than our fair share out of the general society, and they see that we can be self-sustaining and flourishing, then it kind of cuts the tension level down. So being organized is one thing. For a Black person to not be a part of some organization trying to organize and improve Black people is at this point a crime. It is a terrible moral failure not to be a part of something that is trying to change conditions for Black people. You just can't be in the world with no agenda, with no philosophy, no position, living your life. You do not live in a time where that kind of life is possible. You have to be political. You have to choose a side. You have to be involved in some kind of program that's going to move the dial. And you got to understand that we can work all our lives in those programs and they still won't solve all of our problems because it took us 400 years to get in this situation and it's going to take us a long time to get out.
So it's got to be a protracted, transgenerational way of life, a way of life. And things can get better from generation to generation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if we struggle for 5 years or we act like we got good sense for 10 years, that all our problems are going to be solved. We can be better. We can have more control of our own destiny. We can fight more intelligently the forces that are trying to steal our freedoms. We can enrich ourselves and our communities so that we have to be able to, so that we're able to have some, create an economic, economically sustainable life. So we can improve things. If we want to ameliorate all of our problems, if we want to get to Wakanda, that's going to be a long struggle. Yeah. And Sister Azubike, she said this: we have to be able to check them, stop them, and restore Ma'at. She's going to ancient Kemet before they destroy our planet and they destroy themselves.
Well, you know, that's in my wheelhouse. And you know that when you start talking about Ma'at is personal. It got to be personal before it can be external. And so we would have to be we would have to internalize Ma'at. It would have to be within us before we can manifest it in a society outside of us. So that's a whole nother dimension of the struggle to be the highest expression of what you were intended to be. That's part of, you're not going to be able to create externally what you are not internally.
So it sounds like best self theology is just a different phraseology for Mayat, for that whole movement, for Black Christian nationalism.
Well, it's the history of revolutions in the world have been that people have had noble intentions and great ideas to eliminate exploitation and oppression, but when they took control of the organs of government, they created much, what was much like what they tried to get rid of. And it's because until you can change people internally, maintaining or sustaining the changes in society that you envision is it's a losing battle. You have to have a personal life that is a reflection of the kind of life that you're trying to impose on a social, as a social order.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a few things in terms of what we can do. Number one, we have to focus on inner growth and transformation to change the world. We have to first have change individuals, right?
Right.
You said we have to be a part of some organization that's out there trying to move our people, self-determining agenda forward. Do you have you're a huge proponent of lifelong learning? I'm curious to know if you have any books or any podcasts that you would recommend so that we can move upon this enlightenment that we need and then take action on it.
Well, actually, there are a number of things, but I've just recently finished this tome of a book, which is dealing with Frederick Douglass, and I mean the book is, it's gigantic, but going through that story of him and his struggles from slavery to become probably one of the most recognized people of the last of the 19th century, one of the most recognized and admired people of the 19th century.
You're talking about Frederick Douglass?
Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, even Trump recognized him, right?
Yeah, and thought he was down the street.
Right.
But what he and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey exhibit to me is this inner drive to recreate yourself, to reinvent yourself, to be able to move, to evolve, to be more than you are, to move to another level of development. And I think that has to be a mantra for us, that whatever we are presently is a shadow of what we could be. And we have to believe that. We have not been in a fertile environment. We have not been in an encouraging environment. We have not been in an environment that was designed to make us what we could be. What we are in spite of the toxic conditions we found ourselves in. So we do, in fact, have a real superpower to be able to reinvent ourselves on another level, to grow, to evolve, to become more, to become a higher expression of what people think we are. And I think that germ of consciousness has to be instilled in Black children from the very beginning. Like I often say, we're like Jews that send our children to the Nazis to be educated. Until we're educating our own children, they're never going to be what they could be, because you're building a house where there already is a house. Rather than there being a clean foundation, there's already an idea system and a belief system there. So you got to spend all your energy knocking that down before you can build something else up. So we need to be able to build from the ground their whole primal blueprint so that they don't have limits on what they can be and what they can do. And when you look at what Black people have done in this system,
Mm-hmm.
the things we have accomplished, we've accomplished them totally against the odds, with everything being an obstacle. And if we could do what we have done in an environment that was designed to kill us, what could we do in an environment that was designed to magnify us?
Wow.
And that's what we have to be working on. And I'm not saying you got to create a whole world of this. I mean, the first thing is your home has to be that kind of environment. And the next thing you have to work on is your community being that kind of environment. But we have to be able, we have to be able to enable our posterity to realize their possibilities. Because once we do that, the external problems won't be problems. Whatever's out there, whatever's trying to deal with us, we can deal with it because we've shown the ability to deal with anything. As long as we're getting the most out of what we are, if we're living up to our actual potential, then that's where the struggle begins.
Mm. I appreciate that. And yeah, I hear a whole lot of folks saying amen, amen, ashe, in the comments. I would like to end there, but I just got this question. There's a lot of good comments. Ronald Galvin said one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about Putin's Rasputin.
Mm-hmm.
He said that comment just really shed light on the willingness of Trump and the GOP to work with who was at some point their mortal enemies, Russia, right? But now they're working in sync because it's not about nationhood, but it's about white supremacy for them. But Brother Quabbin, I asked this, and since this has been a big topic for the past couple of weeks, what was the likely psychological impact of the assault on Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in terms of us having done all the things we need to do ourselves, but not being able to resist being conquered once again?
The one thing that we have to realize, as Yermo Jabebe used to always say, is that if you're going to build anything, if you're going to build something and you're unwilling to do what it takes to protect it, then why build it? That Black people have always been afraid of violence, and that's our conditioning. We don't want any violence. Now everybody else in America can protect their stuff and willing to go down doing it, but we're not willing to do it. I'm telling you, all you got to do is when you make somebody else's life difficult, they tend to leave you alone. And we have to be willing, if we build something, built into the structure, it has to be the ability to take care of it, to protect ourselves, and be willing to do whatever is necessary, and to have everybody know we're willing to do whatever is necessary to protect what we built. Because nobody in this country has ever given us anything. Everything we got, we fought and bled for it. So we got to be willing to send the message. What we got, you didn't give us, you can't take it away.
A commitment to build, a willingness to defend. That's what it sounds like. So you brought up the founder of the Shrines of the Black Madonna, the Honorable Reverend Albert B. Cleage, Jeremiah Jabebe Ajaman. So let's hear a word from him before we benedict, so to speak.
We would rather eat dirt than go through the kind of oppression that we've gone through in America for 400 years. The basic issue for us is self-determination. It's to be able to live in America with some degree of dignity. It's to have some control of our own destiny. We don't want welfare, colonialism in the Black ghetto. We don't want white business to come in and say, well, we're going to do you a favor today. We're going to give you 300 jobs. The basic issue has to do with whether or not we can control some employment for ourselves. And that means we've got to have some kind of selective patronage. We've got to control businesses in Black communities. White business has to realize if they're going to invest in a Black ghetto, they've got to invest in our nation within a nation on the same basis that they would invest abroad. In the area of politics, we can control Black communities, north, south, east, and west. And by controlling, say, the city of Detroit, with a majority of black people voting as a black bloc, we can control the politics of the state of Michigan. Now, if you multiply that by all of the cities in which black people are now coming into a majority, we'll have a black bloc vote that can have a tremendous influence not only on state governments, but also on the national government. If we can get organized in time, we can determine who's going to be president in 1968. Well, we're not really concerned with their genuineness or sincerity. I think they're decent people, because that's what you mean. But they don't understand what self-determination is as far as the black community is concerned. They don't realize that the black community has come to the place now where everything that's done by government or by private industry or by any Blue Ribbon Committee has to recognize self-determination as the foundation upon which all relationships with the black community are to be built. They either don't realize it, they repudiate it, or they hope that we can be bought off.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Any final words? We've talked about the threat level. You've shared some things that we can do. Any final words?
Well, I think that the struggle for power is bigger than labels that are on TV, and they're never going to talk about it in those terms on TV. And so you're never going to get a clear understanding of exactly what's going on. These label and catchphrases that they use, it's about power. It's a struggle for power. And power is a zero-sum game. If you get some, somebody got to lose some. And so people, they protect their power. And that's the kind of game we're in, and we're not prepared. We're not prepared because we have not yet reached a level of seriousness where we organize ourselves in a way where we can contend for power. And again, I want to make clear, I'm not just talking about contending for power on the basis of violence. I'm talking about contending for power in every possible way, in the schools, in politics, in economics. We have to gain control of our own destiny, and it's a struggle for self-determination. Black self-determination takes power away from people who benefit from our subjugation. So as we build, we get stronger, they get weaker, and we're able to define our own destiny. So until we're willing to organize, become a part of something that is making a difference, then we're just talking.
And because this is a transgenerational struggle, this conversation will need to continue as well, right?
That's right.
All right. That someone is already inviting you back. Someone by the name of Joyce Karima Johnson says, Bishop Nelson, will you come back to Conscious Conversations again, please? I know that's right.
I'd be happy to anytime you need me.
Go ahead. Well, again, Presiding Bishop, we thank you for giving us your time, your insights, your wisdom. And for those who have been watching and commenting, powerful comments, we really, really appreciate you being an active part of this conversation. And we invite you to come back again next week at the same time. But we just ask that, when you come back, please bring a friend. Please bring a friend. But until then, we ask, we hope, and we pray that you do all that you can do to become your best self and become all that the Creator meant for you to be, so that you can give your best to the world and we can build the kind of self-determining nation with power that the Almighty has meant for us. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Presiding Bishop. We'll see you all next week.